All right. All right, I think we're live. Push one in the chat if you can hear me. I think we might be having some mic issues here. Oh, I got a confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 538, Space and Technology. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, those posted on the community tab. There's a doc in the description beneath the video for you to follow along with. If you want to engage in this discussion, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click on. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. Make sure you download the latest Zoom update 5.0.3 before you join the panel, because there is a new update for the client. I want to make sure that everybody is on the right page, on the same page. All right. Drop the link, and then we'll get started. All right. First item on the docket is from Engadget.com. An iPhone and an ultrasound wand could help doctors monitor COVID-19 remotely. I think we talked about this before, that this was coming, that these sort of IOT devices for smartphones were going to be revolutionary in telemedicine. So talked about this before, but it's ironic that this came up. The images in front of me on the Zoom call don't make much sense. There's a pie slice of noisy gray punctuated by long dark shadows that slide around literally. And at the top sits a series of immobile, tightly packed layers. It's all gibberish to a lay person, but Dr. Mike Stone, an emergency physician from Portland, Oregon, can tell exactly what we're looking at. It's a live ultrasound image of a healthy lung tissue as seen through a rib cage. The thing is, he's not the one performing the ultrasound. Instead, he's transmitting visual instructions through an app to a curly-haired Brooklynite pressing a wand to his chest. Welcome to a new way to monitor for COVID-19. The microphone-sized wand in question is the Butterfly IQ, made by a company called Butterfly Network. And in the New Yorker good sport who peeled open his shirt on a Zoom call is Matt DeJong, the company's VP of product. As DeJong explained, this particular approach to medical imaging is nothing new. Butterfly Network has been squeezing its ultrasound on a chip systems into $2,000 diagnostic wands that connect to iOS and Android devices for the better part of 18 months. They've gotten around to, in addition to being used in hospitals around the US, often by physicians who purchase the accessory personally, Butterfly IQs are also used in over 20 countries, including a notable deployment in Uganda. Historically, ultrasound machines have been widely imaging devices that peered into the human body by beaming high-frequency sound waves into it. They also require trained medical professionals to operate them. With the fully handheld Butterfly IQ and the new iOS-only teleguidance feature, neither of those things are strictly true anymore. And with COVID-19 reshaping the front lines of medicine, the company found itself fast-tracking its plans to help medical professionals more easily see patients even from thousands of miles away. So this is a screenshot of the actual platform on iPhone. The beauty of Butterfly's approach to telemedicine is that you don't have to know a thing about ultrasound systems to use it. If a patient is given one to use, they can connect the IQ to their iPhones and have a professional guide them through the process, complete with on-screen cues to help them orient the probe correctly. The same goes for nurses or orderlies in hospitals who don't necessarily have the training to use ultrasound equipment. They can don their full PPE, meet with a patient, and help a physically remote physician or team of physicians find exactly what they're looking for. I thought initially I would use it in the ER, getting images for teaching, said Dr. Stone, who also serves as Butterfly's Director of Education. Now it's the only device I use. I carry with me the ability to not have a push a big cart into the room, the ability to wipe it down immediately after use. As the COVID-19 outbreak continues to flourish, the telltale signs doctors look for are areas of irregular opacity and thickness around the pleura, or the membranes that surround the lungs. If spotted, a doctor virtually instructing someone with a Butterfly wand can remotely control the probe's gain and depth to zero in on potential trouble spots, and record images, record images and short video clips for further inspection. And just like that, a process that typically required multiple people in the room with a patient now requires just one, or even zero if the patient is wielding the wand while recovering at home. The act of embracing telemedicine was always on Butterfly's roadmap, and the company quietly made its teleguidance feature available to its users as a beta a few weeks ago. This new push to put Butterfly IQs into the hands of novices and into homes, however, was only possible because of a new policy guidelines recently put into place by the US Food and Drug Administration to expand the availability, functional capability, and portability of imaging systems to help address the urgent public health concerns. Prior to this, the company's remote guidance tools were mostly being used for research, including one noteworthy partnership with a heart failure lab at NYU. That FDA guidance, however, has a time limit. These updated policies will only last until COVID-19 outbreak is brought under control. That means there's a built-in expiration date for Butterfly's early efforts to make ultrasound available to neophytes. By then, though, Butterfly hopes it will have made its mark. There will always be a need for expensive, high-resolution ultrasound machines. You wouldn't want to try and conduct a comprehensive cardiogram or search for subtle fetal anomalies with something like that plugs into a phone. Even in hospitals, beset by COVID-19 patients, though the normal business of trending to other maladies has to continue. Butterfly's teleguidance tools are meant to help with that too. And the IQ produce, and the IQ produce results that the companies say are on par with a more traditional mid-range $70,000 ultrasound machine. And with the right kind of remote guidance, it's not hard to imagine that a device like the Butterfly IQ could become a crucial part of patients' prolonged in-home care, be it for COVID-19 recovery or other illnesses. That kind of case where the ill can be sent home with a scanner and can regularly provide new diagnostic information to their medical practitioners is a big area of focus for Butterfly Network. Jones said the company drew some inspiration from the glucose meter, a now common bit of diagnostic tech that seemed equally unlikely to see personal use when the first model introduced in 1971. The biggest difference, even with a $2,000 ultrasound wand at your disposal, you cannot and should not try to interpret your own results. But that's the long game. For now, though, in an age where the thought of venturing to a hospital can be almost as far as the treatments involved, Butterfly's priority is helping doctors, wherever they might be, make sure patients get that right kind of treatment now. Yeah, we've covered Butterfly networks before, and I have to say that with this pandemic, everybody is pulling their going into their toolbox to pull out something that can actually contribute to the pandemic. And so this has turned into an industrial complex. So if there's an expiration date on these tools by the FDA and the federal government, a part of these companies is that they don't actually want the pandemic to stop. You know, from a business standpoint, they want the pandemic to go on as far as possible because they want to be able to push their product out there. You know, but that, you know, that comes with the territory of invisible warfare. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities that's going to come out of this: telemedicine, telehealth, teleguidance, telepresence, teleeducation, right? Teleclinics and stuff like that. I'm surprised they use an iPhone. I probably would have used something like a Samsung Galaxy Note, just because of the size and the powerful processor that goes with it, and the screen resolution and the touch screen functionality with the pen. I bet there's a lot of functionality that comes out of using something like a Samsung Galaxy Note. So I'm just saying, just pointing out there that this is definitely dope. We should probably pay more attention to the pandemic from a tech standpoint going forward. All right, next item on the docket is from TechCrunch.com. Fitbit's Chinese rival, Amazfit, mulls a transparent self-disinfecting mask. This should be interesting. The COVID-19 pandemic has ushered in a wave of Chinese companies with manufacturing operations to produce virus-fighting equipment. Shenzhen-based electric vehicle giant BYD quickly moved to launch what it claims to be the world's largest mask plant. Hangzhou-based voice intelligence startup Rokid is making thermal imaging glasses targeted at the US market and many more. The latest of such efforts comes from Huamai, the NASDAQ-listed wearable startup that makes Xiaomi's Mi Bands and sells its own fitness tracking watches under the Amazfit brand in more than 70 countries. In a phone interview with TechCrunch, the firm said it is developing a see-through plastic mask with built-in ultraviolet lights that can disinfect filters within 10 minutes when connected to a power supply through a USB port. The caveat is that the lights can only sanitize the inside of the mask, and users still have to clean the outer surface themselves. Called airy, the mask uses removable filters that are on par with the N95 filtration capacity. If the concept materializes, each filter could last up to a month a month and a half, significantly longer than the average life of a surgical mask and N95 respirators. The modular design allows for customized accessories, such as a fan for breathable comfort, hence the mask name Airy, a homophone of Erie. Erie started from the premise that wearing masks that could thwart the increasingly common adoption of facial recognition. That said, imaging companies have been working on biometric upgrades to allow analysis of other facial features such as irises or the tip of noses. Erie might still have market appeal, argued Pentao Yu, Vice President of Industrial Design at Huawei. Whether people need to unlock their phones or not, they want to see each other's faces at social occasions. Said Yu, the California-based Chinese designer who had served clients including Nest Labs, Roku, GoPro, and Huawei prior to joining Huawei. Huawei's US operation, which focuses on research and development, opened in 2014 and now counts a dozen of employees. Many companies turning to pandemic fighting manufacturing have taken a hit from their core business, but Huawei has managed to stay afloat. Its Q1 revenue was up 36% year over year to hit $154 million, although net income decreased to $2.7 million from $10.6 million. Its stocks have been declining, however, sliding from a high point of $16 in January to around $10 in mid-May. Huawei is in the process of prototyping the Airy mask. In Shenzhen, which houses the wearables company's headquarters, the development cycle for hardware products from ideation to market rollout takes as short as 6 to 12 months, thanks to the city's rich supply chain resources. Huawei hasn't priced Airy at this early stage, but you admitted that the masks are targeting the mass consumer market around the world, not only for protection against viruses, but also everyday air pollution, rather than appealing to medical workers. Given Huawei's history of making wearables at thin margins, it won't be surprising that Airy will be competitively priced. The Airy project is part of Huawei's pivot to enter the general health sector beyond the pure fitness monitoring. The company has recently teamed up with a laboratory led by Dr. Zhang Nanshan, the public face of China's fight against COVID-19, to track respiratory diseases using wearables. It's also in talks with the German Public Health Authority to collaborate on a smartwatch-powered virus monitoring app. That's interesting. I would have thought with a device like this, it would have sensors in there to determine if your breathing, the posture of your breathing can be monitored in a way to determine if there's any sort of anomalies within your breathing patterns, because you may not look sick, but if it can detect heavier breathing versus the normal breathing patterns, it can probably determine that you may be coming down with a cold or some other infectious disease. That would be really dope. And if it can record that to your smartwatch or to an app, and then it uploads it to the cloud, and that data gets fed to your doctor or to the public health authority, you could be looking at something that's potentially valuable, especially at a time like this. Maybe if they started working on something like this 6 or 7 months ago, they probably would have been, their stock would probably go through the roof. Anything could have happened with that. I still think there's a lot of opportunity for it, but all right, let me jump to the next item on the docket. This is from fastcompany.com. Smart cameras will soon check if you're social distancing and wearing a mask. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Imagine pulling up to a supermarket and seeing a big red number on a digital sign outside. Instead of enticing you to come inside with a sales price or specials, the sign is estimating the amount of distance between people inside, suggesting that you stay away until the store is less crowded. Far-fetched as it may seem, at least 3 companies are now racing to build surveillance systems that could make this scenario possible during the coronavirus pandemic. By combining conventional security cameras with artificial intelligence, they hope to identify where people are getting too close to one another or not wearing masks. That way, people can make smarter decisions about going out, and employers can figure out how to create safer work environments. You already are hearing about things like ways for occupancy and people movement as opposed to vehicle movements, not just self-reporting, but automated reporting on traffic information of people in different indoor locations in public areas, says Mahesh, the CTO of Motorola Solutions, which is developing a system of this kind. I think that's just going to be more common until people feel safe enough. So far, most of the coronavirus surveillance hype has centered on thermal cameras, which use infrared sensors to pick out people who might have a fever. John Honovich, the founder of the video surveillance trade publication IPVM, says that on a scale of 1 to 10, interest in fever cameras is like 110. It's totally off the charts. Temperature sensing cameras aren't a panacea, though. Honovich and several other experts say the technology can be inaccurate, and IPVM has accused one vendor of faking some of its marketing. Besides, fever detection doesn't help at all with coronavirus carriers who have no symptoms. Estimates on the rate of asymptomatic COVID-19 cases have ranged from 25 to 80% of those infected. Things like fever detection can be useful, but if people are not social distancing to begin with and are not wearing masks, it's not going to be preventative. As more states push to reopen certain businesses and relax stay-at-home orders, companies in the surveillance business are developing technology to help enforce social distancing. Motorola's Avigilon subsidiary, for instance, is developing software for its latest generation security cameras that will detect when people are standing too close or not wearing masks. This is actually interesting. Now you're talking about using computer vision. That's a part of artificial intelligence, deep learning, reinforcement learning, machine learning. So scientists have recommended staying at least 6 feet apart to reduce the risk contracting the virus through particles in the air. By identifying hotspots where people are violating those guidelines, building managers could figure out how to structure their stores and workspaces and could avoid sending in too many people at the same time. Solution by the end of June, primarily for offices and factories, through those supermarkets and retail stores could make use of technology as well. San Mateo-based Camille is also building a system to detect when people are congregating too closely or failing to wear masks. While Motorola's system requires specific cameras and runs offline, Camille's product works with any security camera through cloud-based software. That's interesting. Advising, a former Google Maps product director who is now Camille's CEO, says the social distancing product is a wartime repurpose story. Camille originally developed it to detect corporate instances of tailgating, in which one person swipes an entry card and several other people slip in behind. By drawing a grid in 3D space, Camille determines when people are standing too close, then presents those images in a searchable database. It's just amazing how hard it is for people to maintain distance, Maslin says. It's completely unnatural. You have to put tape on the floor to remind them, or put outside vestibule niches. Like Camille is targeting factories and offices that must decide how to space out employees and where to put down social distancing markers. But it's trying to get into more public-facing areas as well. One Highway West area in Connecticut, for instance, will be testing a system that shuts the entrance down to new vehicles when crowd density gets too high. Camille is working with Sabio Solutions, an IT integration company in Mexico City, on several other initiatives, including the solution for retail stores that warn visitors about the level of the crowding inside. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it's just they're basically taking all the old technology and repurposing it for COVID or the pandemic itself. I think this is actually a good idea. Personally, it's not that the technology doesn't work. It's been proven to work. So I just find it interesting that this wasn't thought of before. You know, I'm sure that you can place this on drones and have them just fly through urban areas to determine what the status is. All right. And my audio is bad. All right, can anyone hear me now? Am I still Borgen? Yeah, I think there's a problem with the yeah, I think there's a problem with Zoom. I think it wants to update to the latest patch. All right, let me finish up the docket. All right, next item on the docket is from aljazeera.com. Senegalese engineering student fights coronavirus with inventions. Engineering students in Senegal have joined their country's fight against the coronavirus pandemic with inventions such as automatic sanitizer dispensers and medical robots. The students attending a top engineering school in the capital, Dakar, have turned their technical skills towards easing pressure on the wards. And they are already in talks with hospitals over some of their innovations. One example is a small robot dubbed Dr. Carr, which will be able to measure patients' blood pressure and temperature. According to students from Dakar's École Supérieure Polytechnique, ESP, the university is considered one of the West Africa's best for engineering and technology and is highly selective, with 28 nationalities represented among its 4,000 students. Lamine Mohammed Kebe, one of the students who conceived the robot, said the machine would reduce the exposure of doctors and nurses to infected patients and the use of expensive protective gear. At a certain point, we realized that medical equipment was limited. The 23-year-old told AFP news agency, "We can do something." Guided by a mounted camera and controlled via an app, doctors will also be able to communicate with patients through the robot, Kibi said, potentially allowing them to treat people isolated in hard to reach rural areas. Senegal's coronavirus outbreak pales in comparison to the situation in virus-stricken Europe and the United States. But after a slow start, confirmed cases in the nation of some 16 million people are increasing. And as with other poor countries in the region, there are fears that Senegal is ill-equipped to handle a large outbreak. Authorities have recorded more than 1,700 cases to date, including 19 fatalities. Hospital staff in Dakar are also beginning to contract COVID-19, the highly infectious respiratory disease caused by the new coronavirus. Faced with an increased threat, frontline Senegalese doctors are taking the young engineers seriously. An initial prototype designed by the students was essentially a small mobile trolley designed to carry equipment or meals to patients. But Boussao, the head of the emergency ward in Dakar Hospital, asked to redesign it to include medical arms capable of conducting medical tests and upgrade the students are working on now. It's a whole process, Boussao said, adding that the robot could cut down on their use of expensive bibs and gowns, which must be thrown away. Ndiaye, NDI, an ESP professor in charge of marketing the inventions, said that the university has long emphasized practical projects in entrepreneurship, which meant students were poised to act when the virus broke out. The robot is far from being a gadget, he said, and could be produced at a larger scale once ready. We are a public institution. There is one concept that binds us all together, and that is service to the community. So this is a picture of the students working at the laboratory. Other students have devised simpler devices that they also hope will battle the disease in Senegal. Gianna Ajabi, a master's student in electrical engineering, has designed an automatic hand sanitizer dispenser that he said could reduce the need for staff in schools and hospitals to supervise hand washing. It's very simple, it's basic, said the 26-year-old. As scientists, as engineers, we have to meet the challenges and really take our destiny into our own hands. The coronavirus has upended ESP students' lives. Lectures are now held over video, and students who used to tinker in labs until late at night must now rush home owing to a dusk to dawn curfew. But the crisis has also given the young engineers a sense of purpose. What has changed is the responsibility, robot maker Kiwi said before, adding that the students also felt much more patriotism. So this is actually pretty dope to see that this is another invention that they were working on. This is actually pretty dope to see that you know, they're leveraging spare parts and things like that that's available to them, you know, for that purpose. I mean, I'm just looking at this picture and I find that to be a really, really dope, you know, really dope photograph that they was able to capture. And I'm pretty sure that there's probably 1,000 more ways that you can leverage the technology to your advantage on during the pandemic. Although a lot of this is starting to come to the end now, because as they lift some of the lockdown, you know, go through their phase 1 process, you know, you might probably be a little bit too late at this point. It depends if we see any more cases prop up, you know, with a second round. Maybe this might come in handy. But I think that drones are probably going to be the you know, the most prominent product to be developed, mostly because it's not attached to humans and it doesn't have to actually come in contact with humans. So we'll probably see a lot more development in the UAV sector. Actually, no, skip that one. All right, this is from Engadget.com. Alphabet's balloon-powered Loon internet comes to Mozambique. Loon is partnering with local carrier Vodacom in regions with little 4G coverage. Alphabet has announced that Loon will soon provide its balloon-powered 4G internet service to several regions in Mozambique. The company has teamed with local carrier Vodacom to serve the Cabo Delgado and Niassa provinces, two vast regions that currently have spotty or no internet coverage. Loon will soon have services in 2 African nations, as it recently launched in Kenya to improve communications during the COVID-19 pandemic. Vodacom will deploy Loon's technology to provide 4G service with data, voice, SMS, and USSD, Alphabet said. It will work for anyone with 4G voice over LTE in a SIM card, and users will connect as if to a regular cell tower. In fact, it's unlikely that a user will know that they are connected to the service provided by a high altitude balloon, except for the fact that they may have a signal in a location where it previously did not exist, the company wrote. Loon CEO Alistair Westgarth noted that the Vodacom is one of Africa's largest carriers, providing service to tens of millions of people in multiple countries. We view this as a first step to a large partnership that will allow us to serve more of those users throughout Africa, he said in a statement. So far, Loon has landed deals to supply network to underserved regions in Puerto Rico, Kenya, and Peru. The company recently created the HAPS alliance with telecoms and other firms, including Deutsche Telekom, SoftBank, Airbus, Nokia, and Telefonica, to promote the use of stratospheric balloons for internet service. The company teamed with AT&T earlier this month in a project to provide internet to crisis-hit regions. In Mozambique, Loon and Vodacom must first install terrestrial infrastructure to connect the balloons to Vodacom's core networks. Loon will also fly test balloons to learn the local stratospheric wind patterns and ensure that the final balloons remain in the service area. With all that complete, service can start sometime in the coming months, the company said. Yeah, I always wondered, you know, what's the durability of this? What's to say that a bird flies right into it? Um, and what happens if lightning strikes it? Those are things that I kind of worry about. What about penetration of the balloon itself? It just seems really nefarious. Well, I shouldn't say nefarious, but it seems really unstable to put something like that up there. A lot of uncertainty, I should say. Good idea, though. All right, this is from Nairametrics.com. Facebook is building $1 billion high-speed internet across Africa. Everybody seems to be going to Africa. World's largest social media company, Facebook, is designing a massive underwater cable from around Nigeria and other African countries, bringing high-speed connectivity to the continent's 1.3 billion inhabitants. Facebook has partnered with the likes of South Africa's MTN, Britain's Vodafone, France's Orange, and China Mobile, and other Africa-based operators called To Africa to build the laudable project, which worth about $1 billion. According to Bloomberg, Facebook has assigned Nokia-owned cable system providers and others to build the subsea cable. At 37,000 kilometers, Facebook claims the internet cable will equal the total distance covered around the Earth. The main object of this massive project, Facebook says, is to bring efficient and high-speed internet connectivity to citizens of Africa. Africa is currently the least connected in the world, Facebook wrote in a blog post yesterday, with just 25% of its population having access to the internet. The submerged cable will interconnect 23 countries, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. In addition, Facebook said it will provide nearly 3 times the total network capacity of all the subsea cables serving Africa today. Facebook explained that the To Africa project will be made more efficient and durable using aluminum rather than copper, as these could help enhance network capacity. So, yeah, we've talked about this before. I was over there back in February in Rwanda, and this was discussed. And so Facebook providing connectivity to the continent, wrapping it like an inner tube, makes a lot of sense to me, if you ask me. I see nothing wrong with it. Unless somebody else has a better idea, I think this is the only game in town. Oh, it's another. All right, this is from Engadget.com. NASA-backed study on environmental effects of COVID-19 lockdowns. You've probably heard stories of skis and water clearing up while most people stay at home during the COVID-19 pandemic. But how much have things improved, really? Scientists are about to rely on NASA technology to find out. The space agency is funding 4 research projects that will rely on satellites and various data resources to understand how pandemic lockdowns have affected pollution worldwide. One project will study uneven gains in air quality around the world by connecting satellites data to weather, traffic, and other info. Another effort will meld satellite and meteorological data to gauge how reduced air pollution has affected the atmosphere. A third initiative will determine what, if any, effect lowered air pollution has had on water quality. While a fourth will use light pollution satellite data to examine socioeconomic impacts and the effectiveness of stay-at-home orders. The results should inform decision-making long after the pandemic is over. The air quality research could alter transportation policies to improve health, while the water study could influence environmental regulations. It's also safe to say that using light pollution could changes to study social behavior could have uses well beyond a viral outbreak. In that regard, NASA is betting the money invested in science during the crisis could pay off for decades to come. I think what's going to come out of all of this, especially if NASA is lending off its technologies to actually for these studies, there's a high probability you're going to see a lot of SUVs get taken off the road. All those bulldozers and big exhaust systems on there, blowing out black smoke, roll coal. Those vehicles are going to get taken off the road next year, guaranteed. When the results come back, once the results come back, bulldozers, big SUVs, loud pipes, all of those things are going to be out of here. They're going to be out of here. You're going to get rid of them. There's no real reason to actually keep those smog sort of vehicles on the road at this point, especially if the maps are coming back positive. All right, this is from Engadget.com. Intel and Penn Medicine are developing an AI to spot brain tumors. We've seen AI outperform doctors in spotting breast cancer, lung cancer, and skin cancer. Now, researchers from Intel and the University of Pennsylvania are turning their attention to brain tumors. Using Intel's AI hardware and software, Penn Medicine will lead 29 international healthcare and research institutions in creating an AI model trained on the largest brain tumor data set ever, and will do so without sharing sensitive patient data. The project is based on a technique called federated learning, which trains an algorithm across decentralized servers so that hospitals can work together without actually sharing patient data. This will allow the institutions from the US, Canada, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and India to create a much larger data set than any one institution would be able to on its own. So this is an example of the federated learning architecture. Hospital A has private and secure data, and a local AI model is pulls its data from there. The sensitive data is locked and pushed to the federated workflow. And then hospital B does the same exact thing, pushes sensitive data to the, puts his shared data to the federated workflow. So does hospital C. And then everything gets processed here through the machine learning model. AI shows great promise for the early detection of brain tumors, but it will require more data than any single medical center holds to reach its full potential. Intel principal engineer Jason Martin said in a press release, it's unclear how long it might take to develop the model, but the project is being funded through a 3-year, $1.2 million grant from the National Institutes of Health, NIH. According to the American Brain Tumor Association, nearly 80,000 people will be diagnosed with a brain tumor this year, with more than 4,600 of them being children. So we talked about AI, ML, DL, data science on Saturday. If you haven't checked the Black Tech Talk from this past Saturday, make sure you go check that out. Some gems were dropped in there by engineering cannabis. And so this is why, you know, we kind of push this, you know, these ideas of AI, of getting into AI, you know, getting into machine learning. You want to start at machine learning, but you'll eventually branch off. And so there's a lot that's there's a lot that can come out of big data, right? You don't have to necessarily be a computer scientist to actually get involved in this. You can actually do this, you know, usually people who get into AI always came from a certain background, whether it's math or some other form of science. It's actually attainable now. You can actually pick up a book, go to some of these EDX certificate courses, and actually learn this AI, ML, DL, big data courses, and it would actually lead you to this right here. I think this is a good opportunity now to actually start getting into it, especially with this COVID-19 lockdown. People are at home, they're chilling, they're not really doing much because they're not going outside. You should actually be reading. You should really be reading now. Now's the time to really get it in. You've been on lockdown for the last 90 days. You should actually be getting at least one certification. All right, this is from physics.org. Laser loop couples quantum systems over a distance. For the first time, researchers have succeeded in creating a strong coupling between quantum systems over a great distance. They have accomplished this with a novel method in which a laser loop connects these systems, enabling nearly lossless exchange of information and a strong interaction between them. In the journal Science, physicists from the University of Basel and University of Hanover reported that the new method opens up new possibilities in quantum networks and quantum sensor technology. Quantum technology is currently one of the most active fields of research worldwide. It takes advantage of the special priorities of quantum mechanical states of atoms, light, or nanostructures to develop. For example, novel sensors for medicine and navigation, networks for information processing, and powerful simulators for material sciences. Generating these quantum states normally requires a strong interaction between the systems involved, such as between several atoms or nanostructures. Until now, however, sufficiently strong interactions were limited to short distances. Typically, two systems had to be placed to close to each other on the same chip at low temperatures or in the same vacuum chamber, where they interact via electrostatic or magnetostatic forces. Coupling them across larger distances, however, is required for many applications such as quantum networks. A team of physicists led by Professor Philip Trutlin from the Department of Physics at the University of Basel and the Swiss Nanoscience Institute has now succeeded for the first time in creating strong coupling between two systems over a greater distance across a room temperature environment. In their experiment, the researchers used laser light to couple the vibrations of a 100 nanometer thin membrane to the motion of the spin of atoms over a distance of 1 meter. As a result, each vibration of the membrane sets the spin of the atoms in motion and vice versa. So this is really interesting stuff. This is really interesting stuff. I mean, we talked about quantum systems before. Now you're talking about being able to use lasers to push all this stuff. But you know, they use lasers in terms of networking, in fiber, dark fiber, light fiber. They use lasers to push signals down the by a fiber optic cable. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that they're capable of doing this. But when you start talking about quantum systems, now you're talking a whole different ballgame. This is where you go for computer science, especially if you're going to get your PhD. You want to get your PhD in computer science. You want to focus on quantum systems. This is from Live Science. Blind people could see letters that scientists drew on their brains with electricity. That's really interesting stuff. All right, scientists sent patterns of electricity coursing across people's brains, coaxing their brains to see letters that weren't true. The experiment worked in both sighted people and blind participants who had lost their sight in adulthood. According to the study published today in the journal Cell, although the technology remains in its early days, implanted devices could potentially be used in the future to stimulate the brain and somewhat restore people's vision. Known as visual prosthetics, the implants were placed on the visual cortex and then stimulated in a pattern to trace out shapes that the participants could then see. More advanced versions of these implants could work similarly to cochlear implants, which stimulate nerves of the inner ear with electrodes to help enhance the wearer's hearing ability. An early iteration could provide detection of the contours of shapes encountered. Study authors, neuroscientist Michael Beauchamp and neurosurgeon Dr. Daniel Yosher, both at the Baylor College of Medicine, told Live Science in an email. The ability to detect the form of a family member or to allow more independent navigation would be a wonderful advance for many blind patients. The current study represents a small step toward realizing such technology. The study authors crafted the letters by stimulating the brain with electrical currents, causing it to generate so-called phosphenes, tiny pinpricks of light that people sometimes perceive without any actual light entering their eyes. Unlike when light bounces off an object in the room and enters your eyes, phosphene appears as a quirk of the visual processing system. You see these points of light even though they're not actually there. For instance, you may have seen phosphenes when you rub your eyes in a dark room. A phenomenon often described as seeing stars, the author said. Known as mechanical phosphenes, the stars that appear when you rub your eyes were first described by an ancient Greek philosopher and physiologist named Alcman, said John Pizarus, the head of the visual prosthesis laboratory at Massachusetts General Hospital and an assistant professor of neurosurgery at Harvard University. Centuries later, in 1755, French physician Charles Leroy discovered that stimulating the brain with electricity could also produce vivid phosphenes. Even in blind individuals, said Pizarus, who was not involved in the study. In the 1960s, scientists began running with the idea of visual prosthetics. Pizarus said, researchers implanted electrodes in the visual cortex, a brain region that processes incoming information from the eyes. with the goal of generating phosphanes and assembling them into coherent shapes. Scientists assume that if they stimulated multiple parts of spots on the cortex, multiple phosphanes would appear on and automatically coalesce into intelligible forms, much like individual pixels on a computer screen, the author said. But the brain is far more complex than a computer display, and for reasons that we don't yet fully understand. It is actually very difficult to produce recognizable forms from phosphine combinations, Beauchamp and Yosher said. The authors ran into the same roadblock during their own study, but found a way to circumvent it. The team laid an array of electrodes over the visual cortices of 5 study participants, 3 sighted and 2 blind. Specifically, the electrodes sat over a region of the brain known as V1, where information from the retinas gets funneled for early processing. The sighted individuals were already undergoing surgery to have electrodes implanted in their brains as part of an epilepsy treatment, designed to monitor their brains for seizure activity. The blind individuals had participated in a separate study investigating visual prosthetics and had the electrodes implanted at that time. V1 works like a map where different regions of the map correspond to the different zones of our visual field, such as the upper right of the lower left. The authors found that if they activated one electrode at a time, participants reliably saw a phosphine appear in its predicted zone. But if multiple electrodes came online simultaneously, the individual phosphanes still appeared but did not come together as coherent shapes. So the authors tried a different strategy. They hypothesized that the sweeping in electrical current across several electrodes, they could trace patterns onto the surface of the brain and thus generate recognizable shapes. The brain is uniquely tuned to detect changes in our environment. So they theorized that the organ should track a pattern of phosphanes presented one after the other, the author said. Yeah, this is very interesting. I have several people here locally who are visually impaired that are part of some of the pro-Black stuff that we work on here locally. And what happens here is that they have iPhones, but I've never used an iPhone from a visually impaired standpoint, but I guess there's a lot of robustness with the iPhone that allows visually impaired people, visually challenged people to actually utilize to read things back to them and actually make it usable. Because I would have thought that Braille would have been the only choice that they could have. But you think about an iPhone only has one button. So what do you do with the rest of the device, right? So there's a lot of functionality that does come from it. But if you can implement something like this over Bluetooth, imagine you wear it like a hat, and it, basically whatever's in your environment would actually come through the electrodes and then into your brain, and then you would actually visualize what's in the environment immediately. I think there's a lot that can come out of this. And it's too bad that a lot of people aren't really looking into this. What's going on, Nago?
What's going on, Mike?
I'm chilling, man.
All right. A visually impaired iPhone?
No. I was just saying that some of the people I know that are actually blind, they actually have an iPhone, but the iPhone only has one button. I was saying that I thought that people who tend to be, visually challenged, tend to, read in Braille. And so what happens here is with the iPhone, it only has one button. So how do you actually utilize it for someone who's visually impaired? But I'm under the impression that the iPhone has a lot of functionality to it that it does cater to that demographic. And so I'm saying this sensor that they built out that can actually, that goes into a person's brain or goes on top of their head to translate signals into the person's brain so that it shows visuals to a person that's blind. I think that, there should be a lot more study behind that.
Agreed.
I had a person at one of our events. She actually took notes and she's blind. I mean, you got to understand the significance of that sort of brain power and that capability. She volunteered to take notes, and she did a hell of a good job taking notes, and she's blind. Amazing. They don't like you though.
Yeah, they don't like you though. Oh boy.
Yeah. All right. Next item on the docket is from InsideEVs.com. These pop-up public charging state points by Urban Electric are pretty neat. Oh, here we go. Providing at-home charging for drivers who have no assigned parking spaces is a pressing problem, especially in the UK, where an estimated 43% of households rely on street parking. One company working to solve this conundrum is startup Urban Electric Networks, which recently completed a trial of its UE1 prototype pop-up charging hub in collaboration with Oxford City Council. The UE1 charger is designed for convenient overnight curbside charging. The app-oriented charge points deliver 7 kilowatts at each socket and retract fully underground when it's not in use, minimizing the impact of the urban environment. No special charging cables or equipment is required to operate the chargers, and they are designed to be suitable for 90% of residential streets. Respondents to a post-trial survey conducted by Oxford City Council stressed the importance of access to on-street charging and indicated that reliability, access, and availability were the most important factors to consider when providing EVSE. Respondents scored the chargers 4.3 out of 5 when asked if they would recommend them to family or friends. Joanna Spencer, one of the trial participants, said the Urban Electric Hub is completely discreet and makes the business of charging really stress-free and convenient. I hope pop-up chargers become standard in every street. So let me just go over this real quick. I want to see how this really works.
Imagine that you want to have an electric car, but you live in a narrow suburban street like this one here in Oxford. And you've got to have somewhere to charge the car, and there's nowhere to charge it. And that's the whole problem. And you can't have an electric car because there's nowhere to charge it at your home. Really good excuse. About 40% of UK homes don't have anywhere off the street to park their cars, so therefore they're restricted in the way they charge them. But the other problem is, if you put a charging post on a little narrow street like this, it's another piece of street furniture. What you want is a way of charging a car on a street like this that you don't notice unless it's being used. So Ollie, this is
Yeah, that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Although I wonder what happens when it becomes damaged, right? Some idiot drives their car over it and it doesn't, they don't acknowledge it and it destroys it. That's got to be an expensive piece of equipment to replace, and who's going to pay for it? I mean, maybe like in a private, I get, I can't see that being used in a public setting, because what happens in the wintertime when there's mountains of snow on it? How does it pop up then? Or does it even pop up at all? All right, this last one on the docket is from Business Insider. Henrik Fisker says most electric vehicle startups will die off in the next 3 years as they struggle in an area that almost made Tesla go bankrupt. A new wave of electric vehicle startups is preparing to release their first vehicles in the coming years. Rivian will challenge Ford's F-150 with its R1T electric pickup truck. Lucid says it can top Tesla's Model S with an Air luxury sedan, and Canoo wants to do away with the car ownership with its eponymous subscription-only vehicle that resembles a futuristic minivan. But according to Henrik Fisker, CEO of the electric vehicle startup Fisker, most of the new companies planning to take on Tesla will go under within the next 3 years as they struggle with manufacturing. A majority of the new EV startups will disappear over the next 24 to 30 months as they have focused on manufacturing, and they will take too long to learn this highly complex, difficult area. Fiscal told Business Insider. They will not be given enough runway to do trial and error. Further, the next wave of EV buyers will have less patience for initial poor build quality and lack of reliability. Automotive manufacturing is complex and expensive, requiring high fixed costs and the careful assembly of thousands of parts made by different suppliers. Tesla, the only surviving member of an early generation of electric vehicle startups that included Fisker Automotive, struggled with manufacturing for years. Tesla CEO Elon Musk said the electric car maker nearly went bankrupt trying to fix issues with the production of its Model 3 sedan in 2018. But Tesla has begun to turn a corner on the manufacturing as it launched its newest vehicle, the Model Y SUV, months ahead of schedule, and built a new factory in Shanghai in less than a year. Some of Tesla's new competitors like NIO and Canoo are outsourcing production to other companies, while others like Rivian and Fisker will handle production themselves. Fisker Incorporated plans to release its first vehicle, the Ocean SUV, in 2022. Electric vehicle startups will not be the only companies that will fail in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, Fisker said. As manufacturing scale and attractive pricing becomes more important, some automakers and suppliers that make gas-powered cars will also go by the wayside. That's interesting. The automotive industry will never look the same again. There is no back to normal, Fisker said. Value for money will be focused for a much higher percentage of buyers than ever before, combined with increased awareness and of sustainability. Yeah, this is true. He's right. The market will never go back to where it was back in January or December of 2019. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. At least not immediately. And so saying all that, I find it to be interesting because although he's speaking about electric vehicles, he's also talking about gas-based vehicles. People may not go out and buy gas cars anymore. What's the point? If you don't have any money, what are you going to spend it on? What are you spending? And so a lot of auto manufacturers may have to cut their production. What's the point of producing cars that nobody's going to buy them? You got cars sitting on a lot. The warranty is going void. People want electric vehicles, but they just couldn't afford one. Now, with the way the market is going, they may very well reconsider. Should I just save up a couple more $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000 to go put it down on an electric vehicle? Sounds like a good idea, especially if, with the Tesla Model S, the Model 3. And now they're talking about a Model 2 coming out, a hatchback similar to like a Honda Civic. This is a game changer. This is definitely a game changer. I agree with Heinrich. He's saying what we have been saying for a while now, that the market will never go back to the way that it was. It will never go back to that way.
And no question about it. And the more competitive priced you can get these electric cars, or better, the cheaper you can get them, $15,000, $20,000 or under $30,000 vehicle that gets great miles, however it goes. I think that gas vehicles are going to slowly go by way of the VCR.
Yeah. From a tech standpoint, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense, especially for auto manufacturers to actually produce those type of vehicles. Why, people want electric vehicles, they just can't afford them. Going out and buy a gas-based vehicle, it's a hard sell. Unless it does something significant like 50 miles to the gallon, like a Prius or something like that, it's gonna be a hard sell. Because going back to the article earlier about NASA doing the studies, or at least lending their technology to do the 4 studies about the impact of COVID-19 from a ecological standpoint, an environmental standpoint, a lot of those big SUVs with their V8s and their roll coal and their bulldozers and stuff like that, blowing all that black smog out, those vehicles are going to get taken off the road by next year. Guaranteed. It's going to be a cash for clunkers all over again. If this Tangerine tyrant gets his way back into the White House, so they won't have a choice. The maps that are showing now are showing that the lockdown has reduced pollution to a bare minimum, and at record lows that they had not seen before. And this isn't just in the United States, but all over the world. But in the United States in particular, when you really take that into consideration, who's going to be able to drive what vehicle? They're going to have to start changing policies. Either you get rid of that big truck, or we're going to tax the crap out of it. That's what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, the Tangerine tyrant, do you think he's environmentally conscious enough to go with something like this?
He won't have a choice. There'll be too much data. There'll be too much data in his face. If NASA is saying we're seeing this, we're seeing that, and most of your research institutions are saying this as well, he'll have to buckle. He won't have any choice. Because if they can pinpoint,
he's saying it.
If they can pinpoint that most of your COVID cases are happening in areas that had high smog and whatnot, and that the smog from the vehicles actually contributed to the death spiral, or the data of the COVID deaths, that's going to be a hard sale for him, to walk away from, especially going into an election season.
Well, a lot of data is coming out on global warming, and he says that was false, or they don't believe it. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe these guys will. Maybe they will, but it's been a lot of data on some other things that these guys have tried to deny as well.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm saying in an election season for him, if this gets put on his lap and it says we have the data to match all of this from a reputable institution like NASA, that's going to be a hard sell for him to walk away from. He would have to eat his own hat, his own MAGA hat. He would have to put that in his mouth and chew on it in order, in order to accept that he's wrong on this. He's wrong on this. He'll have to wear egg on his face, and that can cost him. That can cost him the election.
Mm.
All right. Let me see if I can get this one item on the docket to work. I don't know why it's not working. All right. Shalom.